She raised her hand to answer a math problem. What her teacher wrote on the board stopped the room cold. If her dad disappears, how long till she drops out too? Laughter erupted. No one stopped it. Not even the teacher. But what they didn't know. Her grandmother was already on the way with receipts, a pen and a war face. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. A brittle silence settled over the math classroom as Amina Price stared at the board, numb. The afternoon sunlight angled in through tall windows, dust motes drifting like apathetic witnesses as her classmates giggled. It had all begun innocently enough, a routine algebra problem meant to warm their brains after PE. Klein, long-suffering and pale with a degree of frustration, had chalked up something about trains leaving stations or apples ripening. Or maybe it was popsicles melting. It didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was when the chalk screeched and settled on them. If Amina's father leaves at 3 a.m. and doesn't return, how long until she drops out too? Laughter. Eyes, some horrified, most amused, found her. She might have stared, unmoving, had the room not felt like a freight train of betrayal entering at full tilt. Her skin felt aflame, not from embarrassment, but from the fire of betrayal. This was not a misstep. It was a aimed arrow. The problem wasn't about algebra. It was about her race, her family, her future, reduced to a punchline, and right there in front of everyone. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The whiteboard margin, once a space for equations, became a ledger of her worth. According to Mrs. Klein's pencil, 0%. She felt herself shrink, sinking into her seat, as each titter chipped away at her confidence. She imagined the chalk dust migrating into her pores, layering shame upon shame. Her ribs tightened, her vision narrowing until the edges of the classroom blurred. Mr. Jones's watch too cheap, he said. His tie old-fashioned, Millie's cruel smirk when she elbowed her friend, Devon's quick smile. Was he laughing with her or at her? Amina? Mrs. Klein's tone was sweet, now, but brittle, like glass being carefully pried from a crack. The laughter drifted off. Would you like to solve it for us? Her throat burned. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was emptiness. The silence quivered, as if the room itself couldn't believe that normal Amina, the math whiz, quiet, steady, was suddenly rendered mute. A flash of anger warmed in her chest. That she could still feel something so powerful told her she wasn't gone yet. Still, she sat in that seat, pinned by expectation and humiliation. She swallowed. Eyes on her, the rest of the class shifting to watch the drama. Even the air felt heavy. Never mind, Mrs. Klein said with a sigh, part sorrow, part annoyance. She erased the question with a flourish, and for a heartbeat the board was blank. Clean, new possibility flickered, but the moment was gone, stolen by the teacher's hand, her controlled bark of apology, echoing false behind the erasers. Amina's chest constricted further, her lungs became a cage. She looked down at her hands, clasped on the desk, how small they felt. She wanted to retake the pencil, challenge that question, show that it wasn't her who was falling, but someone else collapsing, someone wielding power by tearing at her roots. But she didn't. The chance evaporated. Time passed. The bell rang. Other students filed out, chattering about weekend plans, viral TikToks, football stats. But Amina lingered, calculating in her head how many more moments until she could leave, until she could breathe again. Each tick of the second hand was a plaintive plea to escape. When the last student had gone, she lifted her head, eyes red, no tears, just friction, scorched from silent rage. Mrs. Klein lingered at the desk, adjusting her spectacles, calculating something. Guilt? Regret? Entitlement? It was hard to read, but the divide between them had already split open. That night, Amina didn't cry. Instead, her pillow grew damp with sweat as she stared at the ceiling. Blank, relentless, unjudging. Her mother called from the living room. Something about permission slips. Dinner. Amina's voice, when she answered, was steady. She nodded. She agreed, but each ordinary word scraped against the wound. After dinner, she carried her textbooks outside, perched on the back stoop under a sky turning inky blind. The cicadas buzzed. A lonely, endless hum. She opened her book, but the equations seemed foreign. X, Y, Y. The night brought its own kind of exposure. Nothing to hide behind but the dark. She closed the book and texted, "You're not supposed to be here, but I need you." There, In those words was everything she couldn't say in class, in front of Mrs. Klein, in her mind. If school and that joke felt like a pull, this message was her lifeline. A moment later, her phone buzzed. No answer. Then a second buzz. Then a voice. Soft, familiar, like cobwebs brushing dust away. "Baby girl," came the whisper of someone older, deeper, her grandmother steeped in grief and wisdom. A grandmother she hadn't seen in person since before kindergarten. Since the day she moved to this Georgia suburb with her mother to escape. Not safe, but safe. A grandmother who'd stayed behind, who wasn't schoolgirl appropriate for the new neighborhood. Her presence a threat in places where her skin meant more than her words. "What happened?" the voice asked. Nothing else. Just that question, laid bare. And Amina's world cracked open. Homework, algebra, classrooms, all of it tumbled away, exposing a raw core of need. She exhaled. The breath of someone resurfacing from water. Words flooded. Her mother was at work. The teacher said something terrible. Her voice caught. She said, "If Dad leaves, how long till I drop out?" A shaky intake of breath. The grandmother didn't scold. She just said softly, "Hold on." The weight of that was immense. Then a click. The call ended. Amina looked at the dark sky as if she might see her grandmother's hand reaching down through the canopy of stars. For a moment she allowed herself to feel seen. Believed. The world had cracked, but maybe, tonight she had found a crack to let light in. But outside, the porch light buzzed. The neighbors' shadows danced, on the fence. Somewhere a car door slammed. Mundane. Yet everything had shifted. She realized she wasn't alone. And the next step, speaking out, confronting Miss Klein, telling someone else, hovered in the air. A question marked by courage and fear. She closed her eyes and the final image burned in her mind. That chalk message on the board, white and cruel. It wasn't gone. It waited. And so did her answer. Amina stood from the stoop and marched back inside, phone still in her hand. She opened the school's website, faculty, staff directory, email forms. Her finger hovered over the contact administration link, and then she hesitated. Because what happens when you expose a teacher's cruelty, and what if the system is on their side? In that charged silence, she realized she wasn't just solving for XX. She was solving for justice, and the answer might not be an equation she could predict. Lottie Price hadn't been called to war in a long time, but when that phone rang, she felt it. Not in her ears, in her bones. The same bones that had marched from Selma to Montgomery. The same bones that knelt on gravel during voter registration protests. That held her steady when her husband's body was lowered into Georgia soil after being mistaken for someone dangerous at a traffic stop. That kind of grief doesn't fade. It just waits, patient for its name to be spoken again. And tonight, its name was Amina. Lottie stood in the middle of her living room, lights off, TV glowing with some rerun she hadn't been watching. Her phone still trembled in her hand. Her granddaughter's voice had been small. Shaken. Yes, but also holding something deeper. Something Lottie knew well. Rage. Lottie muttered to no one, setting the phone down. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, drifted toward the hallway closet. She opened it like a vault. Folded at the top was her Sunday hat, white, wide-brimmed, with a little feather that had long since given up standing tall. She ran her fingers over the fabric like it was a flag. Below it, her heels, ivory, unscuffed. Next to them, a string of pearls that hadn't seen sunlight since Obama's second inauguration. She didn't cry. She ironed. Every flick of steam from the iron was a memory returned. Mrs. Thompson getting dragged from her porch in '68. The boy from up the road shot because he reached for his ID. The time she had to walk Amina's daddy into a classroom because his teacher said he wasn't articulate enough for honors. Lottie ironed a hat last, slow and precise. She'd buried a husband. She'd raised 3 kids on not enough sleep and less money. She'd tasted the bitterness of injustice so often it had burned the back of her tongue. But this right here, this had her ready. "We're tired, my foot," she muttered as she set the iron down. While others whispered things like "let it go," or "you know how those schools are," Lottie didn't flinch. She'd heard those whispers before. They were lullabies, sung by people too tired to fight anymore. But she wasn't tired. She was rewinding, waking, stretching her old self back into skin that remembered too much. The next call she made wasn't to Amina's mother. It wasn't to the school. It was to Marlene Jasper, who ran the local NAACP chapter like a general runs a base. "Marlene," she said, The moment the line picked up, "What's the name of that boy from Channel 6? The one who always has a camera before you blink?" Marlene didn't need explanation. "Devon Clay, you need media." "I need eyes," Lottie said, calm as Sunday. "On me. On that school. On my baby." Marlene didn't question. "I'll call him." Then Lottie called Deacon Paul. Not for prayer, though she'd take that too. But because Deacon Paul's nephew worked the district office as a tech. The kind who saw things before they made it past admin filters. And while calls were being made, Lottie sat down at her kitchen table, pulled out her composition notebook, black and white speckled, always in the drawer, and began to write. Not a rant, a record. Dates, times, Amina's GPA, the school's mission statement, where excellence is expected. Lottie chuckled. Expected for who? Exactly. She documented everything, like the woman she'd once been in a different fight. Because this wasn't just about Amina. This was about every black child who had to smile through gritted teeth when a teacher accidentally made them a joke. At 3:00 a.m., Lottie's lights were still on. She sat under her yellow kitchen bulb, sipping cold coffee, and whispering a prayer not for strength, but for restraint. "Lord, don't let me catch a case," she murmured. "But don't let me walk away neither." By 4:00 a.m., the emails were written, one to the superintendent, one to the principal, and one to the Georgia Department of Education's Equity Office. Each was polite, but firm. Lottie knew how to code switch when she had to, but the fire underneath each keystroke burned hot. By 5:00 a.m., she'd printed out a full copy of the Georgia Code on Educational Harassment. By 6:00 a.m., she was in her pearls. She stood in the mirror and studied herself. Wrinkles? Yes, but not soft. Every line was a story, every crease a battle scar. She applied lipstick slow and deliberate, deep red. Then she pinned her hair up, slipped on her heels, and fixed her hat like a crown. The sun peeked over the pines outside her window. Birds chirped with their usual blind optimism. Lottie didn't smile. She just whispered, "Let's see if they can do math now." Downstairs, her old Buick coughed awake like a dragon, with asthma. But it still roared. She didn't need directions to Northwood High. She'd been avoiding it for 20 years. That school had taken enough from her family, quietly and politely, behind desks and district codes. Today, Lottie was going to collect. She pulled into the lot just after the janitors. The flag hadn't even gone up yet. Perfect. She didn't wait for an escort. Didn't ask permission. Her heels clicked like a metronome on the tile as she marched toward the front office. Heads turned. A young white secretary blinked up at her. "Ma'am, can I help?" "I'm here for a meeting," Lottie said, "with whoever let a teacher humiliate my granddaughter yesterday." The secretary flinched. "Do you have an appointment?" Lottie pulled out her folder, slapped it gently on the desk. "I don't make appointments to stop injustice, sugar. I show up. Now get your principal." As the secretary disappeared down the hallway, whispering into a phone, Lottie stood still, calm. That old church calm. The kind where your hands are folded, but your spirit's ready to rise. Behind her, the first students trickled in. One of them, a black boy with twist-out curls and a half-eaten Pop-Tart, froze when he saw her. Something passed in his eyes. Recognition. Hope? Lottie didn't blink as Amina's voice echoed from the school PA system. Every hallway went still, like time froze to listen. "This is Amina Price, and I have something to say." The secretary dropped her pen. A student's soda fizzed to a stop mid-sip. Even Principal Kenner, halfway through rehearsing his defense, turned to stone. But before anyone could sprint to the PA room, a teacher, Mr. Beasley, the AV club supervisor, cut the mic. Amina's voice vanished, replaced by silence so thick it echoed louder than any shout. Lottie's fists clenched. Her baby had spoken, and the system had tried to mute her. By the time Principal Kenner reached the front desk, his smile was already polished. White teeth, tight corners. "Mrs. Price," he greeted, nodding as though addressing a stranger at a church fish fry. "How can I help you today?" "You can start by not lying," Lottie said. His face didn't crack, but something behind his eyes flickered. "I understand there's been some misunderstanding in one of our classrooms. We're very committed to resolving this delicately." Lottie's voice cut like sugar-coated glass. "Delicately? That teacher mocked my granddaughter's family on your clock, in your building, with your dry erase marker. What's delicate about that?" Mrs. Klein lingered behind the principal, stiff as starch, her smile frozen in some ancient decade where harmless jokes still passed inspection. The principal's assistant ushered them into a private conference room. Beige walls, a dusty ficus in the corner, and a round table meant to keep conversations civil. Lottie sat with regal posture, her pearl necklace catching the light like a warning flare. The moment they offered her coffee, she waved it off. She didn't come sip. Principal Kenner folded his hands. We value every student at Northwood High, especially our scholars of color. I assure you, what happened in Mrs. Klein's class is not representative of our institution. Mrs. Klein piped in, soft. It was a joke. I admit. Poorly timed. I've already spoken to Amina and told her. She doesn't need your apology, Lottie interrupted. She needs your accountability. The room stilled. Principal Kenner shifted in his chair. Well, Mrs. Price, we don't typically handle internal matters like this publicly. You understand. Lottie leaned in, slow and deliberate. We don't handle racism quietly either. Not anymore. He chuckled nervously. Let's not escalate things. We don't want this to go viral. Lottie's expression didn't flinch. It already is, she said calmly. I called my niece in Detroit last night. She edits for Channel 4. Guess what she loves more than coffee? A story like this, one that smells like a cover-up. Want to see her reply? She slid her phone across the table. The email subject line glowed. We'll run it by Monday if they don't fix it first. Principal Kenner read it, then exhaled like someone who'd just realized the hill they stood on wasn't safe. Let's be reasonable, Mrs. Price. Surely there's a more constructive path forward. There is, Lottie nodded. I want 3 things. 1. Amina gets a written apology. Public. On school letterhead, not a secret email apology from someone's drafts folder. 2. A formal review of Mrs. Klein's behavior, including interviews with students in the room. 3. You include cultural competency training for your entire staff, not a single Zoom and done webinar. Real training. Kenner blinked. That's quite a list. You've had quite a problem. He leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking to Mrs. Klein, who suddenly looked like she might actually break into a sweat. Let me talk to legal. These things take time. Bureaucracy, you know. Lottie stood. No, I don't know. But I do know timing. And this school's clock is out of excuses. He offered another smile, thin and tired. How about that coffee now? Lottie smiled back, sweet, like cyanide in tea. How about I take my own notes, instead? She patted the little black pen clipped to her blouse. It didn't look like much, just another accessory on an older woman dressed in pearls and pride. But as she turned to leave, the light caught a tiny red dot on its side. Recording. The door shut behind her with a quiet click. Outside, the hallway buzzed again. Students shuffled past with eyes widened. News had already spread about Amina's cut mic. They silenced her. Someone whispered, nah. But her grandma came though. She ain't quiet. Lottie didn't speak as she exited the building. She didn't need to. She had recorded every word. That afternoon she forwarded the audio to Marlene Jasper, who already had a Dropbox folder, labeled Northwood Incident, August 20. She also sent a copy to Devon Clay from Channel 6, and a third to Amina's mother with a note that simply read, don't worry, she's not fighting this alone. By dinner, 3 other parents had called her, quietly, nervously. Our kid was in the room too, one said the teacher's done stuff like this before. Another confessed, I didn't want to rock the boat, but it's been going on. Lottie told them the same thing each time. The boat been sinking. We just naming who's holding the holes open. By sundown, the school board's inbox had 13 identical emails, all with the subject, accountability for Amina Price. And Lottie, she was in her kitchen, Bible open but unread. Her eyes were on her laptop, watching the pieces line up. But just when the tide seemed to be turning, a twist crept in. That evening, tucked between routine emails about bus schedules and cafeteria menu changes, a new message quietly pinged into Northwood faculty inboxes. Subject, re-urgent faculty group chat. Do not forward. Teachers, we need to stay unified on the incident regarding Miss Price's granddaughter. Please avoid public commentary. If asked, refer to the administration's prepared response. Let's not let this become bigger than it needs to be. Also, anyone sharing classroom recording statements or outside interviews may be subject to review. Let's remember, we don't air private matters publicly. Office of the Principal. One teacher didn't just read the email. She screen captured it, saved it as a PDF and dropped it, anonymously into a folder titled, For Amina's Grandma. That's when Lottie noticed her presence wasn't just confrontation. It was witness. A few feet away, a girl in a hoodie whispered to her friend, "She here for Amina." I heard. Lottie didn't turn. She didn't need to. The hallway buzzed, and in the center of it, Lottie stood heels planted, hat tall, heart full of fire, just as Principal Kenner rounded the corner, flanked by Mrs. Klein and the school's legal rep. A voice rang out over the PA. Shaky, unplanned. "This is Amina Price, and I have something to say." The hallway froze. He chuckled nervously. "Let's not escalate things. We don't want this to go viral." Lottie's expression didn't flinch. "It already is," she said calmly. "I called my niece in Detroit last night. She edits for Channel 4. Guess what she loves more than coffee? A story like this, one that smells like a cover-up. Want to see her reply?" She slid her phone across the table. The email subject line glowed. "We'll run it by Monday, if they don't fix it first." Principal Kenner read it, then exhaled like someone who just realized the hill they stood on wasn't safe. "Let's be reasonable, Mrs. Price. Surely there's a more constructive path forward." "There is," Lottie nodded. "I want 3 things. 1. Amina gets a written apology, public. On school letterhead, not a secret email apology from someone's drafts folder. 2. A formal review of Mrs. Klein's behavior, including interviews with students in the room. 3. You include cultural competency training for your entire staff. Not a single Zoom and done webinar. Real training." Kenner blinked. "That's quite a list. You've had quite a problem." He leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking to Mrs. Klein, who suddenly looked like she might actually break into a sweat. "Let me talk to legal. These things take time. Bureaucracy, you know." Lottie stood. "No, I don't know. But I do know timing. And this school's clock is out of excuses." He offered another smile, thin and tired. "How about that coffee now?" Lottie smiled back, sweet, like cyanide in tea. "How about I take my own notes instead?" She patted the little black pen clipped to her blouse. It didn't look like much, just another accessory on an older woman dressed in pearls and pride. But as she turned to leave, the light caught a tiny red dot on its side. Recording. The door shut behind her with a quiet click. Outside, the hallway buzzed again. Students shuffled past with eyes widened. News had already spread about Amina's cut mic. They silenced her. Someone whispered, "Nah, but her grandma came though. She ain't quiet." Lottie didn't speak as she exited the building. She didn't need to. She had recorded every word. That afternoon, she forwarded the audio to Marlene Jasper, who already had a Dropbox folder labeled Northwood Incident, August 20. She also sent a copy to Devon Clay from Channel 6, and a third to Amina's mother, with a note that simply read, "Don't worry, she's not fighting this alone." By dinner, 3 other parents had called her, quietly, nervously. "Our kid was in the room too," one said. "Said the teacher's done stuff like this before." Another confessed, "I didn't want to rock the boat, but it's been going on." Lottie told them the same thing each time. "The boat been sinking. We just naming who's holding the holes open." By sundown, the school board's inbox had 13 identical emails, all with the subject, "Accountability for Amina Price." And Lottie? She was in her kitchen, Bible open but unread. Her eyes were on her laptop, watching the pieces line up. But just when the tide seemed to be turning, a twist crept in. That evening, tucked between routine emails about bus schedules and cafeteria menu changes, a new message quietly pinged into Northwood faculty inboxes. Subject: Re-urgent faculty group chat. Do not forward. Teachers, we need to stay unified on the incident regarding Miss Price's granddaughter. Please avoid public commentary. If asked, refer to the administration's prepared response. Let's not let this become bigger than it needs to be. Also, anyone sharing classroom recordings, statements, or outside interviews may be subject to review. Let's remember, we don't air private matters publicly. Office of the Principal. One teacher didn't just read the email. She screen captured it, saved it as a PDF, and dropped it anonymously into a folder titled, "For Amina's Grandma." The screen-captured email had barely finished uploading when the first ripple hit. It wasn't a scream, or a protest, or even a fire drill. It was quieter, more dangerous. The kind of buzz that builds in corners, passed between thumbs on cracked phone screens. The kind that slinks through Instagram DMs and Discord threads. It began with a link, just a folder, no caption, no bio, posted to an anonymous Reddit account titled "Northwood Knows." Inside were screenshots. Dozens of them. The first few showed harmless banter, lunchroom duty swaps, hallway patrols, PTA gripes. But then the tone shifted. A message from M. Klein popped up, time-stamped 2 weeks before Amina's humiliation. Every year it's the same 3 students disrupting class. I swear they're allergic to discipline. Then another. These parents want special treatment. How about starting with homework? And then it slid further. Better off letting them fail. The real world won't hand them anything either. The usernames didn't hide much. P. Bartlett, K. Brenner, J. Lopez, and more than once a reply from M. Klein again. They've got attitude in their DNA. Tell me I'm wrong. The final screenshot in the set sent the internet ablaze. They'll never get out of the hood. Why waste time? M. Klein. That line broke through everything. The folder spread like fire. Twitter picked it up. Then TikTok. By lunchtime there were reaction videos, stitched duets, and audio reenactments. Some used the screenshots over Kendrick Lamar's "Alright." Others wept into the camera, asking how teachers, educators could harbor this kind of contempt. The comments were flooded with rage and heartbreak. I'm shaking. My son goes there. This was my high school. I thought I was the problem. Every word in those screenshots, I've heard them. Different state. Same story. At Northwood, students huddled in bathrooms, showing each other the leaks on mute. Some laughed in disbelief. Others looked like they'd been punched. One senior, Tyson Wells, stared at his screen for a long time. Then he whispered, "That's my name in there. That's M." By 3:00 p.m., parents began arriving early, pulling kids from class. Just in case, they said. As if racism might suddenly become airborne. In the front office, Principal Kenner stood frozen before his laptop, the color draining from his face. A secretary burst in, waving her phone. "Sir, this is trending. Channel 6 picked it up. They just said the name of the school." Kenner's mouth opened, but nothing came out. In the teacher's lounge, a different kind of silence hung, thick, defensive. A few teachers huddled in corners, whispering. One, Mr. Bartlett, paced with his phone pressed to his ear. "No comment," he said sharply. "I told you, that chat was informal. Out of context." But context no longer mattered. Parents began flooding the school board's voicemail. The district office released a half-page statement. "We are investigating the origin of the material and take such claims seriously. All involved parties will be reviewed." But it was too late for reviews. This wasn't a complaint anymore. It was an indictment. At home, Amina sat on her bed, her phone blowing up with messages she didn't know how to answer. "Yo, you see this? They said you started it. Is your grandma really taking them to court? You're famous. Father, I'm so sorry." But proud too. She held the phone like it was made of glass. Her mother sat beside her, speechless. For once the silence between them felt full. Shared, not distant. Amina looked up. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby," her mother whispered, wrapping an arm around her. "You're just in the middle of something big." At that moment the TV lit up with a local news anchor standing outside Northwood's gates. Where earlier this week, a student alleges she was racially mocked by a teacher during class. Today, leaked messages from a private faculty group chat have surfaced, revealing deeply disturbing remarks about black students. Reactions are pouring in from across the country. The camera cut to a parent holding her daughter's hand. If this is how they talk when no one's looking, then how do they treat our kids? Amina's chest rose, then fell. She hadn't asked for this, but maybe it had asked for her. Back at school, the teachers were circling wagons. An emergency meeting was called. A few denied the chat existed at all. Others claimed they didn't remember saying anything. Mrs. Klein? She hadn't returned anyone's calls. Her car sat alone in the staff lot. Windows tinted, engine cold. That evening, as twilight crept into the edges of town, a new post appeared on the original Reddit thread. Just one line. No username, no comment history. "There's video. I saw her record it." And underneath it, a small link. Unopened, unverified. But it was there. The file name on the video. Klein unedited classroom feed. It was 7:52 a.m. when the video dropped. The sky over Northwood High was overcast, gray like a paused storm. But online, the storm had already arrived. The video began with a shaky frame. Someone had propped their phone between a stack of books and a pencil case. A quiet, everyday classroom came into focus. Scribbles on the whiteboard. Backpacks slouched at desks. Kids chatting in hushed tones before the bell. The angle wasn't perfect, but it caught what mattered. Mrs. Klein stood at the board, red marker in hand. Her voice, crisp and too casual, broke through. All right, let's do a fun one. Solve for X, people. She turned, smirking. If Amina's father leaves at 3 a.m. and doesn't come back, how long until she drops out too? The room's reaction was captured in brutal clarity. The gasp. The laughter. One student's spit take. Another girl's mouth open in silent shock. Then the camera caught Amina. She didn't speak. She didn't flinch. But her whole body shrank. Shoulders tightening, hands clenching the edge of her desk. Her eyes locked on the board. Glassy betrayal. Mrs. Klein grinned. Actually grinned. The clip lasted just 28 seconds. But that was enough. It hit Twitter first. Posted by an anonymous account with the caption, "This was supposed to be a joke? Look at her face." Within hours, it had 80,000 retweets. By lunchtime, 2 million views. By evening, it was on CNN. News anchors sat behind glossy desks, calling it an example of systemic failure in education, as the clip looped silently behind them. The hashtags exploded. Done, a menace equation. Black brains matter, not just a story. Teachers across the country shared their own wounds, recounting subtle digs and loud injustices in front of chalkboards. Former students of Northwood began posting too. She did this stuff back when I was there. I thought it was just me. Mrs. Klein once told me I was lucky if I passed basic algebra because we weren't built for math. We all knew she had favorites. Guess who they always were? At the Price home, Amina sat frozen, phone in her lap, eyes wide. She hadn't known someone had recorded it. She hadn't even realized what her face looked like in that moment, until she saw it through the lens of a million strangers. I look small, she said. Her mother reached over gently. You look like someone surviving. Lottie stood behind them both, hands on her hips. She'd seen a lot in her time. Hoses, dogs, tear gas. But nothing had made her blood boil like the sound of those classroom laughs. That woman smiled. Lottie whispered. She smiled. The doorbell rang at 9:30. Everyone froze. Amina's mom peeked out the window, frowning. You know him? Lottie moved first. When she opened the door, a man stood on the porch, white, tall, maybe in his 40s, with tired eyes, and the posture of someone carrying something heavier than he looked. Next to him stood a kid, freckled, nervous, hoodie pulled low. The man held a long rectangular object, wrapped in cloth. I'm sorry for coming so late, the man said, voice low. My name's Dale. This is my son, Mason. He's the one who filmed it. Amina's breath caught. She stepped forward. Unsure. I didn't mean to post it at first, Mason said quickly. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. The way she said it, I knew it was wrong. But I was scared to speak up. I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. Lottie eyed the cloth-covered item. And that. Dale unwrapped it slowly, revealing a framed copy of Amina's algebra test. Perfect score. 100%. In bold red ink. He'd matted it with black velvet, and had a small plaque engraved to Amina Price. Because being brilliant is the answer. Amina blinked, stunned. Dale cleared his throat. I own a framing shop downtown. Thought maybe you deserve to see what they tried to cover. For the first time in days, Amina smiled. Not big, not flashy, but real. Her mom took the frame like it was sacred. Lottie nodded slowly. That was decent of you. Doesn't fix it, Dale said. But maybe it's a start. As the father and son stepped back into the night, Mason turned one last time. They're trying to say it's fake, that the video's AI or something. Just so you know, they're scared. Lottie's jaw tightened. Good. By the next morning, school was chaos. News vans clogged the street. Protesters, local and national, lined the sidewalks with signs reading, "Protect Black Kids, and accountability isn't optional." One woman stood with a speaker blaring Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn. Another had a poster, "Solve for X, Racism Piles Silence," in Northwood. Inside, faculty emails dripped with panic. The superintendent arrived unannounced, flanked by legal counsel and a PR specialist.
Mrs. Klein?
Vanished. No one had seen her since Tuesday. Her classroom sat dark, her staff mailbox empty, her Facebook page deleted. Her last activity, logging out of her school email. Principal Kenner paced his office like it was a cage. We need a statement, he barked. Something airtight. but there was no airtight anymore. The board called an emergency town hall that evening. Parents packed the gym. Students streamed it live. Lottie sat in the front row, curls sharp under the fluorescent lights. Amina beside her, hands folded, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big, but holding herself like she owned the room. One by one, board members fumbled statements. Apologies. Deflections. This is an isolated incident. This doesn't reflect our values. We are committed to learning. Then came the final question. From a parent in the back. Voice loud and clear. Are y'all really investigating? Or just waiting for it to blow over? Silence. No one answered. That night, another anonymous post appeared, this time with a still image, a hidden camera angle inside the faculty lounge. The caption read, "She wasn't the only one. Y'all ready for part 2? The morning after the town hall, the sun crept in slow through the Price family's kitchen window. The coffee bubbled, toast popped, and for a brief moment, it felt like a regular Georgia morning, until the doorbell rang again. This time, Lottie didn't even flinch. She opened the door to find a man standing nervously on the porch. Tall, middle-aged, hair graying at the edges, and eyes heavy like he hadn't slept right in days. He held a small black folder under one arm, and twisted his wedding band around his finger with the other. "Miss Price?" he asked, voice quiet. Lottie nodded. "That's me. I'm Richard Bell. My son Ethan was in Amina's math class that day." His voice cracked at the edges. He's not the kind to speak up in public. Real quiet. Always been like that. But yesterday after school, he came home crying. Lottie stepped aside slowly, her expression unreadable. "Come in." Inside, Amina sat at the kitchen table, fidgeting with a spoon in her cereal. Her mother leaned against the counter, arms crossed, cautious but listening. Richard cleared his throat and pulled out the folder. He said, "Dad, if that was me, I'd want someone to speak up." And then he gave me this. Told me to bring it to her. He passed the folder to Amina. Inside was a single sheet of thick sketch paper, hand-drawn in pencil and charcoal. The image stopped Amina mid-breath. It was her, sitting tall, chin high, eyes focused ahead. On her head was a delicate crown, made entirely of numbers. Fractions, exponents, square roots woven into gold leaf curves. Surrounding her were small ghost-like figures, students laughing, pointing, but their faces blurred, while hers shone sharp and unbroken. At the bottom, Ethan had written, "Queen of the equation." Amina covered her mouth. Her mother stepped forward, touched the paper like it might crumble. Lottie just whispered, "That boy's got an anointed hand." Richard looked down. He told me he was too afraid to speak up when it happened. Said he thought the right thing was to stay quiet. But now he knows. Silence isn't neutral. It just protects the wrong people. A long pause passed. Then Amina asked softly, "He's not going to get in trouble, is he?" "For this?" Richard gave a small, tight smile. "I'm not raising him to be afraid of trouble anymore." Lottie walked over, touched Richard's shoulder. "Thank you. You brought more than a drawing. You brought proof the tide's turning." That afternoon, Lottie posted a photo of the sketch on her barely used Facebook page. She added just one caption, "Even in pain, they crown her." What happened next was a digital flood. Artists from around the country began sharing portraits of Amina. One painted her with chalk dust wings, standing in front of a burning whiteboard. Another, a mural mock-up with her holding scales made of textbooks and microphones. Musicians posted instrumentals titled "Amina's Crown" and "Solve for Me." Poets wrote stanzas like war cries, posted under the tag "Don Black Brains Matter." Let them mock your math. But we invented pyramids before they knew how to count. The moment had become movement. For the first time, Amina felt less alone. She didn't understand how thousands of strangers could rally behind her. But every time she saw a drawing, a poem, a message, her chest tightened, then softened. Something was shifting. But so was the resistance. By Friday morning, her locker was different. The hall was already half full when she arrived. Students moved around her, laughter bubbling in the distance. At first she didn't notice, but as she got closer, a silence crept down the corridor, students parting like tidwater. She stopped 2 feet away. Across the front of her locker, spray painted in bold red letters, were 3 words. "Know your place." Gasps, whispers, phones out. Someone muttered, "Yo, did someone really?" Amina didn't move. Behind her, Tyson Wells stepped forward, lips tight. "We should tell someone." She didn't answer. Lottie arrived 5 minutes later, called by a student who ran to the front office. Her footsteps were slow and thunderous as she came down the hall. The crowd parted again. She stopped in front of the locker, eyes locking on the words. And then she did something no one expected. She pulled a Sharpie from her purse, stepped forward, and in thick, defiant letters, wrote directly under the spray paint. "I do, and it's ahead of you." Gasps turned to applause. Someone caught it on video. That clip, Lottie with pearls on, and fire in her veins, went viral again. This time the internet had a new phrase to hold on to. "I do, and it's ahead of you." It was tweeted by teachers in Chicago, reposted by Black scholars, added to protest signs. It became a badge of resistance, of dignity, of defiance without rage. But underneath the triumph, the threat lingered. Security cameras were reviewed. No suspects found. The paint stayed up for 2 days before being scrubbed. No formal announcement. No acknowledgement. Not even a mention in the morning bulletin. The message was clear: we see you. We just won't say your name. That night, Amina sat in bed, sketchbook in her lap. She flipped to the back and started drawing, not of herself, but of Ethan. Not crying, but speaking. A mouth open, not closed. She gave him a backdrop of stars and numbers, made him look brave. She thought about messaging him, just to say thanks. But before she could, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Just one message. "They're coming for her job, but they should look harder." Klein wasn't the only one. Check the after-school meetings. Thursdays. Attached was a blurred photo, a back room, a projector screen, and 5 silhouettes sitting at a table. A second spray paint incident happened that night. Not on a locker, but on the front doors of the school. "Protect her or we'll tell everything." It started with a knock that nobody heard. The first note appeared folded under the front doormat. No envelope, no signature. Just 6 words in shaky all-caps handwriting. "You people love playing victim." Amina found it on her way to take the trash out. She stared at it for a full minute, before picking it up. Her hands didn't shake. Not at first. She took it to the kitchen table, where Lottie was steeping tea and humming a hymn under her breath. Lottie read it once, then twice, then held it up to the light, like it might reveal the soul of the person who wrote it. "First they mock you," she murmured. "Then they threaten you." "Should we call the police?" Amina's mother asked from the living room, already reaching for her phone. Lottie didn't answer immediately. She simply walked to her purse, pulled out a padlock key and a notebook, and wrote the time and details of the note down like it was just another entry in a long ledger of injustice. They did call the police. Officer Kendrick showed up an hour later, tall, gum-chewing, and half-interested. He held the note with a pen like it might be contagious. "Might be kids," he offered. "Halloween's coming up. People get weird." Amina stared at him. "It's October 3rd. He shrugged. "Could be an early prank." Lottie's jaw tightened. "If this was a bomb threat to the school board president, would you call it a prank?" The officer didn't answer, just nodded and tucked the note into a plastic evidence bag without sealing it. That night, Lottie went to the hardware store and bought a 4-camera security system. She installed it herself, one facing the front porch, one on the garage, one angled toward the street, and one in the backyard. She muttered to herself the whole time, every drill of the screw a declaration: "We protect ours." By Thursday, the notes had escalated. One shoved into the mailbox read, "Get ready for consequences." Another was taped to the windshield of Amina's mom's car. "This is what happens when you lie." The handwriting changed. The paper became cleaner. The threats more calculated. And still the police shrugged. Amina started double-checking the locks, every night. She stopped walking to school. Her mom began leaving work early to drive her. Lottie slept by the front door with a flashlight and her old cane by her side, muttering prayers that sounded like curses if you listened too close. But the threats weren't just at home. At school, something colder began to spread. Teachers grew tighter, more clipped. Assignments came back with suspiciously low grades. No feedback, just red marks. One of Amina's friends, Maya, was suddenly dropped from honors English. No reason, no warning. She said, "I was too distracted," Maya whispered, eyes wide. "I only missed one assignment, Mina. One." Another boy, Jeremiah, got detention for talking back after asking why his grade dropped from a B+ to a D in 1 week. "I didn't even raise my voice," he said, eyes rimmed red. "They're cracking down on anyone who even knows you." Amina listened to each story with growing fury. But it was Lottie who pulled them together. Start writing, she told them. You don't need cameras. You got pens. We'll collect it all. So they did. Quietly. After class. Between hall passes. Dozens of stories. Scribbled in notebooks. Texted. Emailed. Even voice recorded. The list grew longer every day. She told me my name sounded too urban to make it on a resume. He said, people like you usually don't test well. They keep putting me in the back of the class, even when I show up early. My essays started getting C's after I said I supported Amina. The school wasn't collapsing. It was unraveling. What had been whispered was now visible. The veil had been lifted, and behind it was a pattern so old, it had been mistaken for tradition. But the pushback kept growing. Local parent groups began murmuring. Some said the prices were just looking for attention. Others claimed the family was ruining the school's reputation. One PTA member wrote a Facebook post that read, "Used to be a peaceful school until they started this mess. Now it's protests and fake news every day." The post got you. Lottie read it and chuckled bitterly. They mean peaceful like a cemetery. Quiet and buried. But not everyone was quiet. A group of students, Black, Latino, Asian and white, started wearing red X pins on their backpacks in solidarity. The art teacher, Ms. Jennings, added a new unit on protest art. A student-run podcast aired a special episode titled Amina, Algebra, and America. Yet beneath the swelling support, the undercurrent of fear remained. It climaxed the night Amina opened the mailbox. She hadn't meant to check it, just a habit on her way back inside after walking the trash bins to the curb. She pulled out 3 envelopes. 2 were bills. The third was unmarked. No return address. Cream-colored. Thick. She opened it on the porch. Under the motion light Lottie had installed just days before. Inside was a single photo. Black and white. Grainy. Clearly zoomed in. It showed Amina walking to school. Backpack slung over one shoulder. Headphones in. Looking straight ahead. But someone had drawn a thick red X over her face. Just her face. She stood there for a full 10 seconds before breathing. Her legs locked. Her throat tightened. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked inside, photo in hand, and placed it gently on the kitchen table. Her mother gasped. Lottie didn't blink. "They're watching," Amina whispered. "Someone's watching me." Lottie stared at the photo. Her voice was like gravel. "Then let them. They just told us what they're scared of." The next morning, the footage from Lottie's front camera revealed something new. Someone had stood at the edge of their yard for 20 minutes, the night before, still, watching, holding a Northwood High faculty parking pass. Lottie Price replayed the footage 3 times. Each time, her jaw tightened just a little more. The grainy black and white security video from her front porch camera was timestamped 12:47 a.m. It showed a figure standing just beyond the curb, half in shadow, motionless. Their hands were in their pockets, their face obscure. But the one thing that couldn't be hidden, not in the light of the moon or the street lamp behind them, was the lanyard around their neck. Zooming in, Lottie paused the frame. There it was. Northwood High's staff parking pass. She didn't speak. Just clicked save, burned the footage to a flash drive, and placed it into the folder already growing thick with printouts, photos, timelines, and now proof. That morning, she made 2 calls. The first to Marlene Jasper, at the local NAACP chapter. The second to civil rights attorney Rosalind Webb, a black woman known statewide for her ice-cold court presence and refusal to play nice with systems that liked to whisper racism instead of shout it. Within 24 hours, a formal civil rights investigation was opened against Northwood High School and the district. By the end of the week, cameras were rolling on the school lawn. Lottie stood at the podium in a powder blue suit, curls bright in the sun. Behind her stood a line of students, parents, lawyers, and faith leaders. Amina was there too, near the back. Hood up, arms crossed, not to hide, but to shield. She wasn't sure how to be in this story anymore. Was she the spark, or the sacrifice? But when Lottie leaned into the mic, the wind caught her voice just right. And the world listened. "You messed with the wrong math problem." The crowd broke into applause. Reporters scribbled. Cameras clicked. "This was never just about X and Y," she continued. "This was about a classroom where some children were seen as answers, and others were treated like errors. You want to test our children? Fine. But today we're testing you." Behind her, one of the students held up a sign, "Dignity Nail Optional." Amina looked down at the grass. Part of her wanted to be proud. but another part felt conflicted. Her name was everywhere now. Articles, op-eds, hashtags. Strangers drew her like a queen. Protesters printed her face on shirts. But she hadn't asked to be iconic. She just wanted fairness. "I didn't even raise my hand," she muttered to her mom that afternoon. "I didn't ask for this." Her mother nodded, brushing a curl from Amina's forehead. "Sometimes the truth picks you, not the other way around." Later that evening, Ms. Rosalind Webb held a town hall at the local rec center. "This isn't just a student's complaint," she said into the mic, calm but firm. "This is about systemic conditions that allowed a public humiliation to be passed off as humor. We've already received 34 testimonies from current and former students alleging discriminatory behavior from faculty." Murmurs rippled through the room. A parent raised her hand. "So what happens now?" Webb answered without hesitation. "We audit. We review hiring data, disciplinary actions, grading trends by race. We request access to internal emails, meeting notes, and classroom observation reports." A man in the back, clearly uncomfortable, grunted. "All that for one bad joke?" Webb turned. "No," she said. "All that because the joke wasn't isolated. The silence that followed it was rehearsed, and the damage? Ongoing." Lottie stood beside her, nodding slowly. This school had a choice: discipline the problem, or protect it. They chose protection. Now we're choosing exposure. By the next morning, the district office was flooded with public record requests. Former students began submitting statements. One woman, now a doctor in Atlanta, posted a viral thread. "Mrs. Klein failed me for asking too many questions. Told me to be realistic about med school. I graduated top of my class anyway. But I still remember the way she looked at me. Like I didn't belong." Another comment read, "Different town. Same treatment. My teacher used to call me the charity case. I thought it was just me." But not everyone was applauding. A local business owner whose son had once been on the same soccer team as Amina went on local radio to say, "This feels like a witch hunt. Are we going to investigate every teacher who's ever told a joke now?" Online forums lit up with arguments. Some accused the Price family of milking the moment. Others defended Mrs. Klein, saying good teachers are scared to do their jobs now. One comment said, "This is what happens when we let woke mobs teach our kids how to be victims." Lottie read it all. She screenshot the worst ones, filed them away. She wasn't fighting just for Amina anymore. She was fighting for all the children who'd internalized failure that wasn't theirs to carry. But then came the twist. At noon on Friday, the school board issued a short, quiet announcement. An emergency closed-door meeting will be held Monday to address recent events. But when the list of attendees leaked, something was missing. No mention of Lottie. No legal observers. No civil rights reps. No community members at all. Just board members, and Principal Kenner, and someone unexpected. Assistant Superintendent Claudia Marks, a woman known for her neutrality, but who had previously pushed to dissolve the district's equity office for budget reasons. Amina's mom slammed the paper down. "They're circling wagons." Lottie nodded. "Calm. They think we're on the outside now," she said. "But what they don't realize." She smiled slowly. "We were never in. We've always had to knock to be let in." That night, a former teacher messaged Lottie anonymously. "Check the budget reports from last year. They buried something. A payment. It wasn't for supplies." Attached was a blurry image of a check issued to a consultant, with Mrs. Klein's signature scrawled in the corner. The morning of the school board's emergency meeting felt more like a funeral than a forum. Heavy clouds hung low over the Northwood School District building, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Outside, parents gathered, not shouting but waiting. A quiet tension buzzed in the air like static before lightning. Inside, the boardroom was already full. Long oak tables, folded nameplates, a carefully staged backdrop with the district's seal, bottles of water lined up like soldiers. The energy in the room was restrained, rehearsed. Superintendent Carlos Dent adjusted his tie twice before even speaking. Assistant Superintendent Claudia Marks sat to his right, tapping her pen against a thick folder labeled Crisis Containment. What they hadn't expected, what no one had expected, was the click of heels cutting through the silence. Lottie Price entered the room like it was hers, flanked by two civil rights attorneys in pressed gray suits. She didn't ask permission. She didn't announce herself. She simply walked to the edge of the conference table and placed a thick binder down with a gentle thud. Superintendent Dent blinked. "Mrs. Price, this is a closed door." "Then open it," Lottie interrupted. calm as ever, because you're about to hear what you tried to bury. Before they could protest, her lawyers slid forward legal documents. A formal complaint supported by over 50 student and parent statements, a notice of pending litigation, and most damning, a copy of a financial transaction, pulled from the district's own budget reports. You paid a consultant $12,000 last year, Lottie said evenly. But there's no record of work done, no project reports, no invoice trail. She tapped the blurry printout of the check. It was signed by someone on this board. It went to a woman listed as an equity consultant. But this woman also happens to be Mrs. Klein's sister-in-law. A hush fell over the room. Board member Lucien Gable shifted in his seat. That's a misunderstanding. That was for a diversity review, which was never completed. One of the lawyers cut in. And yet it was paid in full, right before Mrs. Klein was reappointed to lead the district's inclusive learning task force. Lottie didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply opened the binder. Inside, full-color printouts of group chat screenshots, documented instances of student grade suppression, and redacted emails between staff members discussing how to contain student sentiment before it grows into unnecessary backlash. Then she handed them the leaked meeting agenda. Bullet point 4. Minimize community disruption. Coordinate messaging for press. Bullet point 6. Evaluate optics of removing teacher versus supporting staff. Bullet point 7. Offer settlement options privately to avoid escalation. Translation: protect the institution, not the children. You brought us here to clean up your mess, Lottie said, locking eyes with every board member. But we are the mess, the one you tried to sweep under years ago. Outside the boardroom, the hallway had filled with parents, teachers, students, and local reporters. The crowd was too big to ignore. Every voice outside was proof that silence wasn't sticking anymore. Inside, the superintendent cleared his throat. Mrs. Price, we are reviewing everything. But these things take time, she asked. You had time. You had decades. But your clock just ran out. One of the lawyers placed a copy of the Georgia Public School Anti-Discrimination Code in front of the assistant superintendent. Under this statute, she said, failure to investigate a documented racial harassment incident, especially one supported by video, written testimony, and now financial misconduct, is grounds for a federal inquiry. A board member, one who hadn't spoken yet, pushed her glasses up her nose. She'd been quiet all meeting, just listening. Ms. Renee Barlow, the only black woman on the board. Always outvoted. Always drowned out. But today she leaned forward, hands folded, and said, she's right, and I move that we suspend all faculty and board decisions related to this case until a third-party investigation is complete. Gasps. Murmurs. Superintendent Dent blanched. That's not procedural. It is, Miss Barlow said, voice sharper now. And if it's not, I'll make it procedural. Lottie locked eyes with her. For the first time that morning she nodded, grateful, not for a savior, but for a witness finally speaking up. You think this is about one classroom, Lottie said, but that teacher wasn't working alone, and now that we've shined a light in your closet, we're seeing the bones. Before anyone could object, Lottie opened her phone and tapped the screen. A projector lit up behind her, Bluetooth connected. The screen filled with testimonial videos from students, faces blurred for safety. I was told I didn't need AP classes because my learning style was different. She said my hair was distracting. He told me, your people always give up by senior year. They gave the white kids extra credit for volunteering. I did it too. Nothing. I didn't know it was racism. I thought it was just me being dumb. The boardroom was silent, not from shock, from recognition. But just as Ms. Barlow stood to call a formal vote, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and excused herself. In the hallway, she read the message again, from an anonymous number. If you back her, we release the video. You know the one. Attached a still frame of her at a 2019 private retreat, smiling beside a man recently outed for racial bias in hiring. The folder wasn't labeled anything suspicious, just annual staff evaluations, 2019-2024. Manila slightly frayed at the corners, the kind of file meant to disappear into the back of a locked drawer. It was one of 6 boxes quietly handed to Lottie by a retired administrative assistant, someone who hadn't said her name out loud, and wouldn't even come through the front door. She'd passed it to Lottie through the back of the community center like it was contraband, her only words being, I kept copies. You'll understand why. Lottie waited until midnight to open it. Amina was asleep. The house was silent. save for the low creak of floorboards settling under the weight of generations. She pulled the first file. Klein. Page after page of performance reviews, each formatted neatly, comments in the left column, ratings in the right. What struck Lottie first was the language. Demonstrates control of the classroom. Occasionally struggles with tone when addressing students of diverse backgrounds. Observed laughter after comment directed at a student. Principal followed up. Incident not documented further. Concerns expressed by 2 parents regarding fairness of grading. Counselor noted disproportionate detentions for black male students. No action taken. Each page had the same rating. Satisfactory. Each incident was footnoted, boxed in by vague qualifiers like inconclusive, no escalation, or handled internally. Then Lottie saw the reason why. At the bottom of the 2021 report, tucked into the smallest print, evaluator Dennis Klein, district supervisor, region. Her husband. Conflict of interest wasn't even a strong enough term. This was nepotism, with a badge. Lottie flipped faster now. 2020. Same. 2019. Same. Every time Mrs. Klein was flagged, be it for classroom behavior, parent emails, or even peer reports, it was swept away with a rubber stamp. Satisfactory. No disciplinary follow-up. Just like a grade she gave one of her students. An invisible red mark that wouldn't go away. Lottie kept reading. And then she found the second file. Hartwell. Same structure. Another white teacher. Multiple comments from students about racially targeted jokes. Suggested student write about gang violence because of their neighborhood. Told class, you people always have the best excuses. But what made this file even more chilling was the note added by a junior evaluator in recommend sensitivity training. Consider temporary reassignment. And below that, scribbled in blue ink, overruled, valuable to department morale. Signed by Claudia Marks, the same assistant superintendent now overseeing the internal review. Lottie leaned back in her chair, the binder sliding closed in her lap. This wasn't just about Mrs. Klein. This was about a system built to protect itself. A network of unchecked power, quietly rewarding the teachers who maintained the illusion of order, even if that meant harming the students they were paid to uplift. She opened another folder. Another teacher. Same story. Then another. And another. A total of 11 teachers across 4 years flagged for conduct described as racially insensitive, unequally enforced, or hostile toward parents of color. Not one had ever received more than a concern comment. Not one had been formally reprimanded, and not one had been black. When Lottie finally closed the binder, her hands were trembling, not with fear but with something older. She'd seen this before. When her husband was denied tenure in his last teaching job because he wasn't a cultural fit. When her youngest son was suspended for loitering on school grounds because he'd stayed after class to help a friend with homework. When her own principal, back in 1968, told her she'd never be more than a polite agitator. She had been polite long enough. The next morning, Lottie didn't go to the district. She went to the press. With permission from the students and families involved, she sent copies of the evaluations to 3 outlets. Channel 6 News, the Georgia Tribune, and The Root. Within hours, the headlines changed. Leaked evaluations reveal years of bias shielded by Northwood District. Teacher accused of racial joke had prior complaints covered by husband's authority. More than Klein. Systemic failures uncovered in explosive school records leak. The board scrambled to control the narrative. A statement was released calling the evaluations preliminary findings taken out of context. Superintendent Dent declined interviews. Mrs. Klein's attorney issued a brief message. We are confident the public will see through this smear campaign. But the damage had been done. Parents who had once stayed quiet now demanded answers. Teachers who once stood in silence emailed anonymously to confirm what they'd witnessed. Former students from as far back as 2007 came forward with stories that mirrored Amina's and worse. Inside the folder buried near the bottom, Lottie found a final item. A small yellow sticky note, paper clipped to a summary sheet. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Almost hurried. If you push further, be ready for what's next. No signature. No date. But it was clear. Someone in the system knew this was coming, and they were hoping fear would keep the lid shut. But fear was not the language Lottie spoke. She gathered every document, scanned and duplicated everything, and prepared to share it with the State Department of Education's Civil Rights Division. That night, Amina sat at the kitchen table staring at the folders, her fingers brushing the edges. They knew, she whispered. They always knew, Lottie said. And no one stopped it. Lottie's eyes burned. Not until now. Across town, inside a quiet office, a man reviewed an email marked urgent. Attached a list of files shared with the press. His name Dennis Klein. His subject line contained this. Immediately. The first post hit a little past midnight. A throwaway Instagram page. No followers, no profile photo, just the handle. A truth about Amina. The opening image was grainy. A screenshot of a text conversation, supposedly between Amina and a classmate. Let's stir stuff up, the caption read. She knew exactly what she was doing. Within minutes, similar accounts sprouted like weeds across platforms. TikTok, X, Facebook. Anonymous voices, each more reckless than the last, shouting variations of the same lie that Amina had exaggerated, that the video was edited, that she'd set it all up to go viral. The tone wasn't just skeptical, it was surgical. Doctored photos appeared. Amina smiling in class. Captioned, "Sure doesn't look traumatized." Spliced audio clips played her voice out of context, edited to sound mocking, even manipulative. One clip, completely fabricated, had her saying, "They'll eat it up if I cry a little." It was AI generated, but convincing to those who already wanted to believe it. By sunrise, Aminalade was trending. Local news stations, desperate to retain their objectivity, began pivoting. Anchor desks posed questions with smoothed-over concern. Did the student misinterpret a teacher's joke? Was this a case of racial overcorrection? When activism turns into attention-seeking, where's the line? Even some allies, former teachers, distant family members, hesitated to repost updates. Supportive parents removed signs from their yards. A few of Amina's classmates distanced themselves entirely. "She's bringing too much heat," one boy mumbled. In the cafeteria, "It's not even safe to sit next to her." At home, Amina scrolled in silence. Her cereal sat untouched. She didn't cry. Not this time. She just stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over a new message request. "Y'all always playing the victim. Go back to where you came from." Lottie saw the screen. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't say what she was thinking. Instead, she spoke like she was reading from memory. "This is the oldest trick in America's book. When you can't kill the truth, you kill the witness." Amina looked up. Her voice didn't shake. "I didn't lie. I know. But now people who used to believe me don't. They were never listening to begin with," Lottie said. "They were just nodding." At school, flyers began appearing on lockers. White paper, red letters. "Ask her about the video. She's not what she seems. Truth matters." None had a signature. Some were taped to Amina's locker directly. Others slipped under her desk. The school responded with a tepid email about unauthorized materials and student privacy, but refused to acknowledge the nature of the attacks. Principal Kenner called it a learning opportunity in media literacy. But Amina wasn't shrinking. Not anymore. Every lunch period, she began holding informal teach-ins at the far end of the cafeteria. No microphone, no stage, just her, sitting on a bench surrounded by a growing group of students who were tired of pretending things were fine. She brought case studies, talked about coded language in the classroom, showed news clippings about school push-out trends, and how discipline disproportionately affects Black students. She read Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, even brought in Ethan, the white classmate who'd drawn the crown sketch, to share what it meant to speak up and make amends. Her voice was different now, firmer. Still soft, but steady. "No more apologies. We're not broken," she said one afternoon, chalking quotes on the blacktop. "We've just been made to feel small." And still, the smears rolled in. One anonymous email sent to the school board read, "If you let this circus continue, we'll leak her grades next." Another message, sent directly to her mom's workplace email. "Take your lying daughter and leave before she poisons the rest." But Lottie knew how these things worked. "The point isn't to make us disappear," she told her lawyers one evening. "The point is to make us question whether we're worth defending." Amina overheard it. She didn't interrupt. She just went back to writing her speech. The school had reluctantly announced a mandatory assembly, an attempt to restore trust and unity. Most expected the principal to drone through half-hearted statements and maybe announce some diversity training slideshow. What no one expected was for Amina to step forward during the Q&A. She wore a denim jacket with the red X patch stitched to the shoulder. Her hair was in a braid crown. Her sneakers squeaked slightly as she walked to the microphone. The gym grew quiet, the air brittle. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, because I didn't want to become a headline, but I'm already that. So here's what you don't know. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. This is a copy of an old evaluation form. Not about Mrs. Klein, about someone else. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Then she looked directly at the school board table and said it. It's about Mr. Gable. Gasps cracked through the gym like glass. Mr. Lucien Gable, longtime board member, PTA favorite, and one of the most vocal defenders of the process. Amina unfolded the page slowly. It says he dismissed a racial harassment complaint from a student in 2018, and again in 2020. Both were never followed up on. The board scrambled. Mr. Gable's face went ghost pale. He stood to object, but Amina raised her voice. This wasn't just about me. It was never just about a math problem. It's about every time we spoke up and were told to lower our voices. In the back of the gym, a woman stood up. Short hair, sharp eyes. I filed that 2018 complaint. She said, my name is Tasha Dean, and I'm ready to talk. The moment Tasha Dean said her name, the energy in the gym shifted. Students craned their necks. Teachers froze mid-breath. Board members glanced at one another with the kind of nervous tension usually reserved for live wires and courtroom confessions. Tasha stepped forward with quiet authority. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. I filed a racial harassment report in 2018, she said, her voice slicing through the gym's silence. I was 15. I was told my complaint wasn't credible. I was told to focus on graduating, not stirring trouble. Mr. Gable was the one who dismissed it. I have the email. She held up her phone. The screen glowed with a forwarded chain. Lottie stood at the edge of the bleachers, her hands clasped over her heart. Amina locked eyes with her for a split second, and then turned back to the microphone, something new burning in her chest. Not just anger, not just fear. Purpose. She swallowed and leaned forward. I kept quiet about a lot of things, but there's one I've never told anyone out loud, she said. Last year, I got called into the assistant principal's office after I missed a homework deadline. Mr. Halverson looked me dead in the face and said, some kids just don't test well, especially your kind.
Gasps. Audible.
Two teachers covered their mouths. A boy in the front row whispered, Yo, what? Amina continued. Her voice was unwavering. I didn't report it. I thought it'd sound like an excuse. I told myself to work harder, to prove him wrong. But now I see this as a pattern. They make you question you so no one questions them. For a moment, no one moved. Then a voice from the crowd. I heard him say that to Daryl too. Then another. He told me I wasn't leadership material. Said my energy wasn't a fit for honors. Then it poured. Students stood one after another. She said my name was too hard to pronounce. He laughed when I read aloud. They marked me late every time, even when I was on time. The gym wasn't just a room now. It was a courtroom. A confessional. A stage for the truth no longer interested in being quiet. By the end of the day, the floodgates had burst wide open. Local news didn't wait for press releases. They aired clips from the assembly, pixelating faces but leaving voices raw. National coverage picked it up by morning. Hashtags rebounded with new fury. Believe Black students. Northwood uncovered. And the simple but cutting your kind. Within 72 hours, Assistant Principal Halverson was placed on leave pending investigation. Mr. Gable temporarily stepped down from the school board, citing personal reflection. 2 additional teachers were suspended after emails surfaced showing they'd joked about problem students being weeded out. A full audit of grading patterns and disciplinary records across the last 5 years was publicly announced. Protesters flooded the sidewalk outside the district office. Not just students but parents, grandparents, activists, teachers from other districts who brought snacks and signs. One group set up tents and sleeping bags, calling it Camp Clarity. Every evening, a teach-in was held under the parking lot lights. Amina stood in the middle sometimes, not leading, just being. Her presence said more than most speeches could. One evening, a Black mother brought her 2 sons and said, You gave my boys something I didn't have growing up. Proof they're not imagining it. Even skeptics started returning to the fold. Former doubters reposted Amina's speech. Even Principal Kenner, once evasive, emailed the district a statement. This is not about one teacher. This is about the culture we allowed. That ends now. But Amina wasn't celebrating. Because she knew how this country worked. Winds came fast and fell faster. Pushed too hard and the narrative flips. That's why she kept showing up to make sure no one rewrote the truth with prettier lies. At home, the pressure hadn't lessened. Anonymous messages still popped up. Old friends still kept their distance. The school still hadn't apologized directly. But in between those cracks, something else grew. Resistance. Righteousness. Resilience. One night, Lottie stood at the kitchen sink watching Amina eat cold rice and scroll news updates on her phone. "You didn't just speak," Lottie said. "You unlocked something. And once people start tasting their voice, they don't go back to silence." Amina nodded. "I'm scared, Granny." Lottie sat beside her, took her hand. "Good. That means you know how real this is. Courage ain't never been the absence of fear. It's been walking anyway." The next morning, something strange happened. 2 black SUVs pulled into the Northwood School District lot. No logos, no media tags, just tinted windows and purposeful steps. A man and a woman stepped out in pressed suits. They walked straight through the front doors, flashed IDs, and requested a private conference room. They were federal education compliance officers. No one had known they were coming. Within minutes, word spread through the building. "A federal audit? Like real federal? Do they have subpoenas?" By lunch, district staff were being quietly escorted into rooms for interviews. Computer files were requested. Printers paused mid-page. An email was sent to all faculty. "Due to an unexpected administrative audit, please be available for compliance interviews. Do not delete or alter any electronic communications or evaluation records." It was official. Northwood had become a case study. That afternoon, a government-issued sedan pulled up outside the Price home. A woman in a gray blazer stepped out holding a sealed envelope. She knocked twice. "I'm here for Amina Price," she said. "We need her to testify." Change didn't come like a tidal wave. It came like scaffolding. Layered, intentional, built in the open where everyone could see. By the end of the second week of the federal compliance audit, it became clear to everyone from janitors to journalists that Northwood High wasn't just under fire. It was undergoing transformation. What began with Amina's voice cracking in a classroom had unraveled into infrastructure. At lunchtime, the far table in the cafeteria, once a gathering place for silence and caution, became the headquarters of Northwood's newly formed Black Student Union. They called themselves Equation, a nod to what had been used to humiliate Amina and what she'd reclaimed. Their mission? Balance. Their first project, organizing student liaisons to attend every public school board meeting. Their second, tracking disparities in classroom seating charts, assignment expectations, and hall pass enforcement. Within days, students submitted over 40 reports, and it wasn't just the students. Parents who once whispered in parking lots began speaking from podiums. They created the Northwood Equity Action Coalition, a grassroots group that collected stories, filed FOIA requests, and held office hours for students and families afraid to speak out alone. Amina's story had stopped being a story. It had become a structure. Local HBCUs reached out. Spelman, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse. Letters came printed on thick paper, embossed with seals and signatures. Amina's name was passed between admissions departments like something sacred. One letter read, "We see not just your strength, but your brilliance. We would be honored to have you lead in our classrooms." Amina read that one twice, then a third time. Her hand trembled. "You're not just invited," Lottie told her. "You're wanted." But the most surreal shift was watching the fear drain out of people's voices. Once hesitant students now walked the halls with their backs straighter. Teachers who once spoke in coded language found themselves flanked by kids who knew their rights. And the school board? It buckled. One member resigned, citing moral conflict. Another requested to be moved to a different district for safety. Superintendent Dent was no longer taking questions from the press. Yet amidst all the pressure, one ghost still lingered. Mrs. Klein. She had vanished after the earliest leak, removed herself from all public-facing platforms, and retreated somewhere rural, somewhere invisible, until she resurfaced. It was a Sunday morning. A rural live stream from a small church near Athens, Georgia, made its way onto social media. There she was, standing at a pulpit, tearful, hand gripping a tissue. "I was doing my job," she said. "I was trying to relate. I've been bullied, smeared. They say I'm a racist. But I'm a teacher, a wife, a believer." She wore white. The congregation clapped. Some murmured amens. But what happened next shifted the air. A young woman in the back stood and asked, "Then why'd you laugh when you said it?" The question sliced through the sanctified quiet. Mrs. Klein froze. Another voice rose. Why were there other complaints before her? Then another. You said you'd answer everything. So answer. The camera caught her eyes flicking toward the exit. Mid-sermon, she stepped off the pulpit, grabbed her purse, and walked out. That clip, viral within the hour. Captioned simply, accountability always comes due. Back in Northwood, a reckoning was coming to a head. The school board had called an emergency meeting to vote on the future of Principal Kenner. In the past, he'd been a figurehead, a smile and a signature. But now, as evidence surfaced of his silent complicity in evaluation, cover-ups and mishandled complaints, the board had to decide, remove him, or lose what was left of public trust. The votes were tallied one by one in a closed chamber, while the public waited outside in tense, prayerful murmurs. 4 votes to remove, 3 votes to retain, and 1 empty seat. All eyes turned to board member Daryl Whitmore, a swing vote, but his chair sat cold, untouched. He hadn't shown up. No phone call, no email, no warning. He's stalling, Lottie muttered outside the building, arms folded, pearls glinting under the porch light. Maybe he's sick, a reporter offered. Lottie caught a glance sharp enough to break stone. Power never catches colds when it's time to protect itself. Inside the room, murmurs thickened. Could the vote go forward without him? Could the board override the count? The bylaws were vague, deliberately so. But then an assistant rushed into the chamber with a folded note. Handwritten. Smudged. She handed it to the board chair with trembling fingers. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning, and then he read aloud. Effective immediately, I resign from the Northwood School Board. I cannot carry the weight of this silence anymore. Signed, Daryl Whitmore, and paper clipped to the letter. One final twist. A printed screenshot of a 2016 email from Principal Kenner. Subject, keep this out of the record. For a moment the room was still, a silence so dense it felt like the breath had been pulled out of every body sitting in the school board chamber. The resignation letter from board member Daryl Whitmore sat like a ghost on the long mahogany table, its paper trembling ever so slightly under the weight of what it meant. Principal Dawson, once untouchable, once dismissive, once casually cruel in his own polished way, sat stone-faced, his jaw clenched, as if grinding down what little dignity he had left. Behind him, a lawyer whispered, urgently, but Dawson didn't blink. His mask had slipped, and underneath it wasn't remorse. It was calculation. The room buzzed with tension, eyes flitting from face to face, waiting for anyone, to say what came next. And then the door creaked open. Every head turned. In walked Miss Cynthia Ramos. She moved like she hadn't just arrived late, but like she had finally arrived. The board's only Latina member. Until now she had sat quiet during the firestorms, her expressions unreadable, her statements few, her allegiance unknown. Some called her neutral, others, cowardly. But in this moment, her silence broke like thunder across the room. She clutched a thick binder in her left hand, its tabs peeking out like war flags. In her right was a pen, already uncapped. I was reading, she said simply, as she stepped into her seat. She turned to the board chair. Before this vote is certified, I want it on record that I reviewed every file, every evaluation. I met with the students. I met with Amina Price, and I met with 3 former teachers who resigned quietly because they were told this isn't a school for troublemakers. Her voice rose. This school protected grown adults who mocked children, who gaslit parents, who laughed off the damage they caused. That ends today. Gasps rippled, but Ms. Ramos didn't flinch. I vote to remove Principal Dawson from his position. Effective immediately. And just like that, the tie broke. The board chair looked down at the vote tally and exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding his breath for 5 years. Motion carried, he said. A ripple of stunned silence gave way to scattered applause. Then shouts. Then tears. Outside the chamber, the crowd watching on the live stream burst into cheers. Some cried openly. Others hugged. One girl collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. It's really happening. She kept whispering. It's really happening. Inside, Dawson stood up slowly, still stone-faced. He adjusted his blazer, nodded without a word, and walked toward the exit. But before he reached the door, Cynthia Ramos called after him. You had years to lead with integrity, she said. But you chose to lead with silence. He didn't turn around. That same night, the board passed a sweeping series of reforms. mandatory racial bias and equity training for all district staff, reviewed and led by third-party organizations with lived experience, a formal student rights charter to be posted in every classroom, an anonymous reporting system with legal backing and transparency standards, and a public audit of 5 years' worth of disciplinary and grading records. The shift wasn't just procedural. It was cultural. For once, the institution didn't just bend. It shifted. The very air in Northwood seemed different. The next morning, students walked the halls like they finally owned their names. Teachers second-guessed their comments in a way that wasn't performative, but reflective. An announcement played over the loudspeakers, recorded by students, not admin. This school belongs to all of us, and we will protect each other. In the classroom where it all began, the board had been repainted, not erased, painted. A mural led by the art club, now stretched across the back wall. Amina's face drawn in bold lines and soft tones, crowned with equations. Next to her, a quote, "Silence is not neutrality." At home that evening, Amina and Lottie sat side by side on the back porch. The air was warm. Cicadas hummed their quiet rhythm. Amina leaned into Lottie's shoulder. "I still don't feel like a hero," she whispered. "You're not," Lottie replied gently. "You're a seed." Amina turned. "You grew into something they couldn't ignore. Now it's your turn to plant what's next." A silence passed between them, rich with meaning. Lottie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed at the corners. "This was from your granddaddy," she said. "He wrote it when your daddy was born. I've kept it for years." Amina opened it carefully. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in ink that had faded but never dulled. "We speak because we must, and we rise because they won't hand it to us." Amina swallowed hard. Her eyes welled, not with fear this time, but fire. The next morning, Amina stood before the auditorium of students and teachers, one final time, and said 5 words that froze the room. "I'm running for student president." The stage lights were warmer than she expected. Gentler, not the harsh fluorescence of Northwood High's auditorium, but the soft amber glow of a college poetry night in Atlanta. The crowd was hushed, buzzing in that quiet way right before something sacred is about to be spoken. Amina Price stood alone at the center of the stage, palms open, notebook in hand. It had been months since the vote, months since Mrs. Klein's smile faded behind a church exit door, since the protest wrapped up their tents and the district posted a list of overdue apologies online, since the mural was finished, since the cameras left, but none of it left Amina. The classroom, the math problem, the laughter, the silence that followed, and then, everything that came after. Tonight she wore a simple black dress and gold earrings shaped like question marks, her own little nod to the mystery she had once been to people too afraid to see her. Lottie sat front row, her cane propped beside her, pearls gleaming beneath her denim jacket, the one with the X patch stitched on the sleeve. The host had already introduced her as activist, author, and spoken word artist, but that felt secondary. She was just Amina, a girl who once froze in a desk when a teacher made her a punchline, a girl who now held the mic. She opened the notebook, cleared her throat, and began. "Solve for X," she said. But X was not a number, not a figure in a problem, not something I could plug into a clean white box. X was me, the one they left blank, the unknown variable they were too scared to factor in. Not because I lacked value, but because they never expected me to carry weight. She looked up. The audience didn't move. They said I'd drop out. They wrote my name in jest. But I wrote it back in fire, in chalk, in ink, in protest signs and voting ballots. They told me to sit down, and I stood up. They told me to quiet down, so I learned to speak louder in verses. And when the numbers didn't add up, I didn't change me, I changed the equation. Lottie's hand pressed over her heart. Behind her, a row of students snapped their fingers in rhythm, moved by every word, many of them wearing red X pins on their jackets, tokens of solidarity that had made their way from Northwood to campuses across the state. So when I say solve for X, I'm not asking for your formula. I'm telling you, I was never the unknown. You just refused to see me. Silence followed. Then thunder. Applause so loud it drowned out everything else. People rose to their feet. Lottie wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, proud tears falling fast. Amina bowed her head once, not low but intentional. She returned to her seat, and for a moment, the night felt still, like the world had exhaled. Backstage, a girl no older than 16 tapped Amina's shoulder. Hey, she said, voice trembling. That poem? It's my story too. They said I didn't belong in AP Lit. I've never told anyone that before. Amina smiled softly. You just did. As the room emptied, Lottie wrapped her arm around her granddaughter. You did it, baby, she whispered. You took their ex and gave it a name. Amina leaned into her. No, we did. The drive home was quiet. No more flashing headlines. No more whisper campaigns. Just two women who had survived something together and built something new from the ruins. But even in the peace, Amina couldn't help but wonder. For every story like hers, how many were still unfinished? How many were still stuck between the joke and the silence? Between humiliation and healing? Somewhere tonight, in some other school, in some other classroom, how many more Aminas are sitting at their desks right now, head down, knowing the answer but too scared to raise their hand? And will anyone notice before they're erased, too? No child should be mocked for where they come from. No voice should be silenced for telling the truth. If this story made you feel something, don't scroll past